What's up, Bladers? In today's video, I'm going to show you how to fix your launcher as well as troubleshoot some issues you may be having with it. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the launcher I ended up fixing already and show you guys how to take a working launcher and maybe troubleshoot some issues you may be running into. To start that project, you're going to need to have a Phillips screwdriver and you're going to want to have a flathead for later on. What we're going to end up doing first is removing the 6 screws from the back of the launcher and the one in the center in order to take it apart. Now that we've gotten here, we can go ahead and take this apart and see all the inner workings of this. Let me go ahead and take this piece off. There are little sparkers in here, so be careful not to lose those because that's what gives you that whole sparking feature. Okay, now that we've gotten to this point, I'm going to go ahead and just move this over here just for my sake. I'm going to go ahead and remove. If you listen right here when I take this out, you're going to hear the tension from the spring unwind. And I will show you how to put that tension back into it when we get there. A few things to note. If you look at this side, it has an arrow here. So if you're worried about having to re-ravel your string back up, this arrow on this side actually represents which way you should re-wrap your string back around. So don't worry about forgetting or trying to remember. There's some indicators on here that actually tell you which way to go. What ended up happening to us was the string on our red launcher ended up getting frayed and damaged. So we had an extra blue launcher that was also damaged a little bit more severely, that we were able to salvage the string from that and put it on there to get a working launcher. In order to do that, I'll show you what we did. We took the 3 screws out of here, popped this lid off. Now there is an indicator on the bottom here, so there's only one way it can go on, so don't worry, you can only put it back on one way. And what we did here is that we just took this string part out, obviously, and put the new one that we have currently on here back in. Following the pattern on this side, rewrapped our string around, and we were good to go. However, there are other issues that can occur down here that I'm going to go into depth on now, just past this point. We had another launcher that ended up having the spring in here. When you pulled it, it would lose its tension and get pulled back into itself and become binded inside of its unit, which looks like this. All you do is you push on that top center piece, it'll pop it right out. Now in our case, this piece was sucked inside of itself and was binded. And you may think, well, that spring's no good and you're done. Actually, there's a very simple way to fix it. It's not complicated at all. What we're gonna do is we're gonna simulate the same concept here and just go ahead and pop this open. And when you do that, you're gonna end up having your spring. Come on, let go. Probably. Oh. Usually it pops out and uncoils itself. So this is what it should look like, with this part being in the center, being held by this piece. Something like that. And then this would go over on top. But to show you guys, if your spring does get damaged and it ends up uncoiling, which would look something like this, this is quite easily fixable. The way you're going to do that is you're going to take this piece that I just showed you earlier. We're going to stick it inside of here, just like how it was supposed to be. And we're going to stick it back through here. If you notice, there's a little notch right in here. We're going to let the metal part here, the metal spring coil, hang out. We're going to put this on, not all the way, just part way, so it's not quite all the way locked into place. We want to be able to get it off in case something else happens. And we want it to be able to coil up as we spin this. Because what we're going to do now, we're going to take that flathead and we're just going to follow that arrow that's right here and coil it back up. Now this could take some time, so just be patient. If it comes apart, reset. Careful not to let it come across your hand, it can cut you. These edges are kind of sharp. I am actually being careful, even though it doesn't look like it. Now, as we get towards the end here, we're not going to pull it all the way into itself, because that's the problem, is it kept doing that. We're going to go ahead, try and lock it in now. Go ahead and lock it in. If you notice there's some notches here, those notches are for these notches on the coil spring to get locked into, which will then be held by the outer part that gets attached to this. So take it to right about there. Make sure that we're got tension happening and that it springs back. Sorry. And we're going to take this piece and we're going to put it all back together. And again, this is another piece that only goes on one way, so take your time, figure it out. So you got 3 holes here. You're going to line 2 of them up, and then there's a notch right there. Line them up and get it in. Get your spring in there. Sounds like it's good. Feels like it's all put together. Now we're going to take our string. We're going to go ahead and put that back on. And to do that, I'm going to put the knotted end on the big open gap right there. Restring it just through these little crevices they give you. When the cap goes back on only one way, you'll know if it's wrong. You're gonna have a nice seal right in here, no gaps. Alright, don't screw these down too tight, just want them nice and snug. Not too tight, you might crack the plastic, so don't crank it. Following this arrow, we're going to wrap our string back up and around. And make sure that those 2 gold pieces, that the small one stays on the knotted end when you put it in there, and that this one is up here and that they're separated. Sometimes it might get tucked up in there, the smaller one, and you won't notice it. And you're going to want that in there. It just adds an extra security and rigidity to the string itself. Now that we've got our string back and attached, our spring has been replaced and reset. We're going to go ahead and add tension to it by turning this the same direction this arrow is showing us. Telling us to turn this way, and we're going to just put enough tension on there. Every spring is going to be different actually, so you may want to test your spring before you go too tight. Kind of coil it up and see where it starts getting a lot of tension, and then back it off. But rule of thumb is probably about, I'd say 5 to 8, in between there maybe, is a decent number to start with. Again, if you go too tight, you'll definitely end up pulling that spring back inside of itself and having to do this whole process over again, but lessons will be learned. So I probably did about 7 there, 7-ish. What I like to do, a little different than what I see a lot of other people end up doing when they go to put their launchers back together. I like to start over on this side, so I'll load my stuff in the way it needs to go. Right launcher has different plastic pieces than the left launcher, so follow accordingly to how they are. I like to set it in like that first and get it on this piece of the frame first. Usually I see a lot of other people go into this part because of this, but I like to just wedge this piece in between here to get it back home. So I'll show you how I do that right now. So I'm going to hold this part down so we don't lose our tension that we just got in there, and I'm going to just carefully, kind of forcefully wedge it in there. Don't be too forceful, you will break it, but you're gonna have to use a little bit to kind of wedge it in. And it's back together. From here, you can take your shell, the top piece for your sparkers, make sure they're in there, and go ahead and place that back on. And we'll get these 6 screws back in. And now for the last part, we're going to take this piece. Doesn't matter which way those grooves are, they're just for these to go into. There you have it.
Alright, so there you have it, Bladers. Works great. Can't be mad. So if you guys have any questions, any thoughts, make sure to drop a comment down below. If you guys liked what you saw in today's video, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. Now get out there and let it rip.